Well, good morning and welcome. I'm so thrilled to have everyone joining us virtually this morning. And what a great crowd that we've assembled for the 16th year of co-hosting the Women in Business event with the University of Nebraska College of Business. And I really think each year it just gets better and better. You know, Lincoln really has been a tremendous community for mentoring and developing women business leaders. We've been really an epicenter for women leaders, from mayors to newspaper publishers to bank leaders, hospital administrators, College of Business Administration deans, LPS superintendents, and multiple elected officials. And I would like to think that events such as this help grow and promote future women leaders in Lincoln. So I want to say to everyone, congratulations for participating in your future, your successful future. You know, I was looking back yesterday at my comments from last year, and I must share with you a paragraph that I said last year. So here I go. Last year's theme could not be more, or I'm sorry, this year's theme, meaning last year, could not be more timely. Embracing change with everything that has happened at the local and national level. We know that disruption is part of life and that it is invaluable to have insight from our community leaders. Wow, that couldn't have been more prophetic. It scares me just a little bit. I think I'll be a little bit more deliberate and careful with my comments this year. So here's what I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to next year: recovery, prosperity, and most of all, harmony. As you know, we have done a COVID pivot with our Women in Business event, which was previously conducted as a half-day in-person event to a one-hour multi-day virtual event with 3 different speakers, talking about various aspects of women in business, including presentations from Brandy McManus with University of Nebraska College of Business on how women negotiate in the workplace. And Kim Roback will be sharing her path to success and why challenges still exist after the push of equality. And today's speaker, Councilwoman Sandra Washington, will share her thoughts about governance and leadership in the new normal. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to Sandra Washington. Sandra, originally from Columbus, Ohio, has lived in Lincoln since 1990. She worked with the National Park Service for nearly 25 years. She retired in 2014 as the Associate Regional Director for Cultural Resources, Planning, Construction, Communications, Legislation, and Congressional Affairs. Well, that's a huge job. Congratulations, Sandra. That's very impressive. Sandra has served multiple terms on the Homestead Girl Scout Board of Directors, the Lincoln Parks and Rec Advisory Board, and as a Lancaster County Planning Commissioner before her appointment to the City Council in June of 2019. She currently serves as our at-large member of our City Council and sits on the board of Nebraska Trails Foundation, the Nebraska Park Conservation Association, and she attended Ohio State University for undergraduate and graduate school and is a lifetime member of Girl Scouts USA. Sandra lives with her spouse, Deb Sirksina, their daughter, Bella, and their canine companion, Wally. They all love travel and sports. And before I turn it over to Sandra, I would like to remind everyone to please ask questions during the seminar. We'll address them at the end of Sandra's talk. You can use the Q&A section down at the bottom of your screen and pose a question. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Sandra. Sandra, I'm so excited to have you here today, and I'm going to turn it over to you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Wendy. I really appreciate the invitation. And thank you so much to Nicole and Todd and everyone behind the scenes who put this conference together. I know it's a challenge that we're not all in the same room, having a chance to make eye contact. For me, I was just telling everyone in the warm-up session that I probably should have gotten my kids' stuffed animals and lined them all up in front of me so that I actually could see faces and make eye contact with someone. And so if you want to help make this a little bit more real for me, you can unmute your microphone and let me hear your coffee cups. And maybe if you could shift around in your chair so I could hear the creaking, then it would be real life conferencing. Now I know that the person who's managing tech doesn't want all that extra noise, so I'm just gonna have to pretend you have made a lot of noise and made it possible for me to stand at a podium and go, okay, all right, thanks. Now that we're all settled, good morning. My name is Sandra, and as Wendy said, I am a member at large city council person here in Lincoln, Nebraska. The opportunity to speak to women in business is a bit daunting for me, given that the primary business I've been involved in for the last 30-some years is government. First at the state level in Ohio, then with the federal government, with the National Park Service, and now at the local level, first with the Planning Commission and now City Council. I did have some business experience as a young person. I was the owner of a lemonade stand. I thought it was very successful, but as I shared with Wendy earlier, setting up the business was a lot more fun than actually running the business for me. So it's a good thing that I went in to government service. So what do I know about leadership? What could I tell a group of women who are in business about leadership? First, I'd like to tell you a little bit about service. Both of my parents would tell you that they did not believe in volunteerism. My parents were very busy working, trying to make ends meet, trying to provide for a better life for us. So they did not volunteer for bake sales, nor did they often drop money in a kettle at the holidays. Every dime was saved for family. But either one of them would see a young person with promise or an older person trying to make ends meet, and both of them would step in. Both of them thought that this was not volunteerism. This was just something that needed to be done. Those are my examples. Now, my mother was a bit ambivalent about service to country. My father was completely all in. He's a Marine. He was a Marine. And then he went to work for the Department of Defense for the next 30 plus years. So he was in on the service to country, but my mother had watched some of her brothers leave and not return from World War II. And so her service to country, she felt like their family had already given enough. But both of them, my father more so, believed that you had to lend a helping hand, and there was a calling to serve community. So back to business. I'll get back to service in a moment, but back to business. The profit margin has never been my concern, and adherence to mission is similar for all kinds of endeavors. For profit, non-for-profit, governmental, and civic organizations, and the accomplishment of a mission requires leadership. I know different situations call for different leadership styles and skills. Some situations require a formal style of leadership based on rank and responsibility and a clear chain of command, while other situations call for an informal approach. On the formal side, I've held frontline supervision, mid-level and upper management positions throughout my career, and informally, I've led small work teams charged with delivering results. And then after the project was over, we disbanded. I've also been involved with collaborative and shared leadership kinds of positions where each of us took the lead on a different aspect of the project, and we stayed together for a longer time. Formal leadership models are more clear-cut, but they're not necessarily easier. The more formal the leadership model, the more accountability, the more adherence to rules and standard operating procedures. There's a tendency to believe that if it's a formal leadership position that you're a manager, and then managers have all kinds of rules and policies they have to deal with. But real leadership can be done from multiple places, both from a formal place, from an informal place, from the front of the room, from the side of the table, even in the very back. A person can take on leadership characteristics and provide leadership. You don't have to be in that position at the front of the room or the title on the business card in order to be a leader. One of the most difficult positions I've ever had was in mid-level management, because not only did I have to lead my employees, or actually, well, I'll start with lead. I had to lead my employees, but I also had to serve my supervisors. So it was a position where, yes, you had people who were looking to you for leadership, but in all honesty, I was serving my employees. I was clearing the deck of obstacles for them. I was making sure they had all the resources they needed to accomplish mission. And at the same time, I was trying to serve the people who sat in positions above me, trying to assure them that we were getting the job done. It was a lot easier to be the frontline supervisor, to know that there was a certain job that needed to be done, a certain task. You had 3 or 4 people that you were working with, and you could do that task every day. Of course, the tasks changed, but the scenarios played out in the same way over and over again. That is a very fortunate place to be, to know what's in front of you every day and to tackle it. The position I'm in now does not require something so simple, and there are times I wish it did. Of course, there's the day-to-day work of making certain the city is operating, and some of that work can be done in a very task-like manner. But then there's leadership in a larger space. The summer between my junior, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about characteristics I think leaders have. The summer between my junior and senior years of college, I took a job as an environmental educator at what was then National Center West, an outdoor adventure Girl Scout camp in the Bighorn Mountains of Wyoming. The pay was minimal, but the experience promised to be worth every dime I was going to have to make up in work-study hours the following semester. For the past few summers ahead of this job, I had taken jobs close to home, places familiar to me, where I knew the staff, I knew the job. There wasn't as much risk. So now I was looking for adventure. Taking the job in Wyoming, I would have an opportunity to step into a new experience, a new geography, a new set of challenges. I was prepared to be the site naturalist, to develop exhibits, to provide classes and courses in ecology and flora and fauna. I wasn't prepared to relocate rattlesnakes from campgrounds and to sit on a horse for 6 or 8 hours a day. That really wasn't my thing, but they found out I knew how to saddle a horse, and they figured that I was the person to go on long pack trips. I actually am really resentful of the fact that when you've sat in a saddle for 8 hours, that when you get to camp, the first thing you have to do is take care of the horse and not yourself. So this was really not going to be something for me. But what I found out is leaders step outside their comfort zone, and they see challenges as learning opportunities. At the start of my Park Service career, I was put in charge of a small research and planning project in western Kansas. The project was in Russell, Kansas, the hometown of Senator Bob Dole, who was very involved in the fact that we had this job to do. The agency was asked to determine if a U.S. Army Corps of Engineers reservoir and state recreation area met the qualifications as a unit of the national park system. Needless to say, at the time, with an economic bust period for oil and gas, and Central Kansas actually has a lot of oil and gas, but it was a bust moment in that economy, and there wasn't a lot happening in the early 90s economically for them, and so hundreds of people attended this public meeting. They saw the potential of a new national park unit in Central Kansas, North Central Kansas, as a real economic potential. People drove 2 hours. They came from Great Bend to come to this meeting in Russell, Kansas. Now, when you have 500 people in a room, some are in favor, many are opposed, but everybody's interested. I was terrified. I thought that a public meeting would have maybe 70 people in attendance, and we had cookies. I thought if we just have cookies, people will know it's a welcoming kind of thing. We were meeting at the Catholic Church Social Hall, which was the biggest room that we could meet in, and people started to overflow. And so we had to go to the school, borrow some speakers, set up speakers outside, leave the windows open so people sitting on the lawn could hear what was happening inside. My boss had come to the meeting because he wanted to see how I handled myself, but I assumed that he was there to moderate because the meeting had gotten so large. And he said, no, it's your meeting, go ahead. And as I took a deep breath and started to think about how I could ever wrangle control out of this, He whispered to me, "This crowd is a group of individuals wanting to be heard." It took a few minutes to work out my nerves, but I eventually saw what he saw. Leaders listen. The last 14 months have been quite a journey for me, learning the new job, figuring out parliamentary procedures and the protocols of city council. And then disruption, to use something that Wendy forecasted last year. Disruption in all kinds of ways. The coronavirus, economic hits, weeks of demonstrations for racial justice, and a growing sense of social unrest in our community. All the while, we did have the budget to pass. We had development projects to keep on track in our reviews, and dozens of regular city items to move forward. If I hadn't learned it as a parent, it was completely evident to me this year. Leaders manage multiple priorities, some conflicting, but all of them at the same time. In the council sessions and committee meetings where we review liquor license and change of zones, and we discuss recommendations for policy changes or grant proposals for new electric buses, I feel like our leadership at the city is really about stewardship, to carefully tend to the city and the residents today, and for future generations I'll never get to know. It's easy to be pulled into short-term thinking, to considering what is best for today and not think about the long term. And certainly the last few months have given us good reason to make short-term decisions to get through the crisis. But if we're doing our jobs correctly, we're thinking multiple generations ahead of us, because we want to make certain that what we take care of today and the decisions we make today generate positive results and success much further down the line than I could see. Leaders are good stewards. I've been thinking a lot about the service aspects of leadership lately. As I told you, when I held the middle management position, the service aspects of leadership were very evident to me in having to serve bosses and employees. As a city council person, I see elected officials, myself, in service to the citizens. And I know that sounds a little bit magnificent, like I think highly of myself, but it's just the opposite. I am humbled by the fact that my job is to serve the residents of Lincoln. And as a member at large, I don't have a luxury of only thinking of a district. So when I say this, I know that I will never meet everyone I'm responsible to. But that doesn't make my service less meaningful or authentic. I'm wondering, what does leadership mean if we can take service and collaborative leadership models and put them together, where we are leaders in service to others and willing to share in a collaborative model? I'm not sure yet. This is certainly something I am trying to figure out. Because of the Black Lives Matter movement and the response of our community to that, I have seen dozens of people enter the democratic process locally. People who may not have felt enfranchised enough, people who may not have felt invested enough, or did not feel like the city was invested in them, have come forward and said, we want to be involved. We want to be heard. It is daunting to look out and realize that what we do matters more than ever to each of our residents. One night, I wish I could only say one night, but one night when council went to midnight, or just a little beyond, I was beginning to feel disengaged. And I don't mean that I was getting sleepy. certainly sitting in a chair for those many hours is a little tiring. But I was feeling disengaged because so many people were speaking to an amorphous blob. I felt like they were talking to us people or whatever, and they were making accusations, and they were speaking from their hearts. But I kept thinking they're only seeing each of us in our position here at the dais. And I was beginning to I don't know, separate myself and I felt a little disengaged. And I thought, I have got to find a way to make a connection. Now, it's not the habit or our protocol to engage in a back and forth conversation with everyone who comes to the open public comment period. But I needed to, and we're wearing masks. So half our face, our nonverbals aren't really working for people. And so, they're having to look at our eyes. If they look at us in our eyes, we have to communicate from here up, or, with our shoulders or something. But it's not, I don't think we're communicating as well with our masks on, because most of us, all of us, communicate verbally and non-verbally, and we pick up so many cues around us. And I thought I have got to get past the barrier of my mask, the barrier of the screens, of the distance, of the position and the power. The meeting ended. It was raucous in the lobby. You could hear what was happening in the lobby and chambers. We ended the meeting, and I pulled my things together, and I went to my car, and I thought, I'm just exhausted, I'm going home. And I turned my car around, and I drove to the front of City Hall. I parked and got out of the car and walked up to the protesters who had been there since noon, and now it's after midnight. And I said, do you guys have a moment? And when they recognized who I was, they were a little surprised. And I said, if you don't mind, I'd like to visit with you for a moment or a few. And I said, tell me what's going on. And I had a chance to to make a connection, even with the mask, but we were 6 feet away. All right, we were probably 5.5 feet away, but we were in close proximity to each other. We were looking in each other's eyes. I had an opportunity to make that connection and to sit with them and find out how their day went and what they thought was happening right now and where they wanted to make an impact. That 30 minutes that I spent on the street with them helped to remind me that even when there are separations, that we are connected. We are connected to each other. And it was important for me to lead by listening and to lead with compassion. There are so many possibilities for our community. And I know that those possibilities are going to be made more evident and more real when we include and encourage new leaders to come to the table and new leaders to be involved. I'm going to read you a quote from a book that I've kept on my nightstand for a couple of weeks now. It's called Synchronicity by Joseph Dworsky. And in the introduction to the book, Peter Senge, probably someone you've heard of, wrote this. Leadership is about learning how to shape the future. Leadership exists when people are no longer victims of circumstances, but participate in creating new ways. Ultimately, leadership is about creating new realities. And so my question for all of us is, if leadership is about new realities, how do we find a way to take advantage of the niche that I see in this moment for new leadership skills and new leaders to blossom and take hold? Skills such as deep listening and active compassion that leads to more equity, more strength, and more joy. These are not the kinds of words that you're probably used to hearing from elected officials. But I think joy has a place in our community. I know I felt it before. I know I'll feel it again. Thank you.
Sandra, what a great message. And it's one that all of us need to hear right now. We so appreciate our relationship with you at the Chamber of Commerce. We know that we have a true leader and a person that will speak her honest truth to us, and we never have to worry about how you feel or where you stand on an issue. And we appreciate the conversation. I wonder if you might mention to the participants that are with us today, is there other than voting, what else would you recommend that that people do during this time to be more participatory?
That's a great question. Of course, voting matters, but we get to vote twice, right? We get to vote in November and we get to vote in the spring. So though important, I think a lot of the real work happens by jumping in. You know, a number of years ago, there was the book Lean In, or, you know, trying to encourage women to lean forward, to take on new opportunities. And I think that one of the ways to be involved is to pay attention to what's happening. Make yourself aware of all of the things that are going on. And if you can't take in all, take in as much as you possibly can. Find out how government works. One afternoon after a council meeting, there were lots of people in the hallway, and they were frustrated because they didn't understand we had time limits for how long you could speak. They didn't understand that we didn't engage in the two-way conversation, and they were milling around in the lobby. And James Michael Bauer, Councilman Bowers, and myself stepped out and started to talk with folks. And at some point, someone asked me something, and I said, well, that's not the city council's purview, that's the county board. And they went, the county board? What's a county board? And I was like, okay, so let me walk you over to the county board offices. They're right next door. And I gave them a spreadsheet or whatever. There was a organizational chart. And I said, here, take this organizational chart, learn about the county board, find out what's on their docket every week. Read, come to the city council, read what's on our docket. If you can't come to city council, you can watch it later. And then find out all of the pieces that go into decision-making. Get involved in the long-term comprehensive plan. There is still time to get involved in the long-term comprehensive plan. So that is a request I'm making. Get involved, find out what the plans are for Lincoln and Lancaster County until 2050, because that's the horizon, and that's the near-term horizon. I know that 30 years from now doesn't seem near-term, but that's the near-term horizon that we're planning, because the decisions we make about what we want in 2050 will ripple on many more generations.
Thank you. I'm getting a bunch of questions here on my phone and on the chat session here. So here's another one for you. Related to your point of combining servant leadership and collaboration, you talked about the time of vulnerability and connection after a contentious meeting. In your view, how important is it to be willing to be vulnerable to make a difference in leadership?
I think it's critical. It may be the scariest thing that we do, is to open ourselves up to others in that way. But I don't think that it is possible to be authentic if you haven't shared something of yourself. And I don't mean, you know, like vomiting personal information. I mean, making yourself open to listening is a way to be vulnerable. And if you can deeply listen to what someone else has to say, even if you don't agree, you give them so much support. You show them so much respect and caring by being willing to listen. And that's an act of vulnerability.
Yep, absolutely. So as we've got another one right here. what's the most challenging situation you have faced as a leader? And it can't be the pandemic. Uh, what's the most challenging situation as a leader? And then second, another addition to that, same person is asking, why did you choose to serve as a councilwoman?
Okay. Well, it's easier for me to answer the second question. I'll answer the second question and be thinking about my answer to the first question. So I agreed to serve on Lincoln City Council, and it was an agreement because I did not run for election. I'm appointed to City Council, and I agreed to serve first because I was asked. Keep that in mind. If people don't know that there is an interest in their skills, they may never offer. And women more than men. This is something that we will live with our whole lives, taking our humility to the grave. So first, I was asked. And secondly, I thought that I had something to offer. I am motivated by service more than I am motivated by everything else. In my career, I have worn the uniform of a Girl Scout, both as a child, as a leader, and as an employee, proudly. I've worn the uniform of the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, another service job, and I've worn the uniform of the National Park Service. And nothing made me prouder than to realize that as a ranger, I would be looked at as someone who could help. And really, that's what I think I'm doing. I think I can offer a new perspective. I have planning skills, I have science, and I have a deep desire to see our community be better. I'm not saying that Lincoln's not great. Lincoln is a great community, but I know that we can be a better community. And those are the things that motivate me. That and resiliency, parks, trails, open space, equity in all kinds of ways. All of those things motivate me. But I serve because I was asked and because I think I have something to offer. Now, the most challenging leadership position obviously probably has something to do with my job with the National Park Service. There are so many examples. I mean, it could be, employees who are just dead set against the mission. And your job is to try to instill the mission in them. All right, this is it, because I failed. So I'm going to tell you about a failure. So this was the most challenging leadership experience for me. For 12 years, I worked with a team of people to create a tribal national park in South Dakota. Half of Badlands National Park it's a huge park, and there's the North Unit and the South Unit. The South Unit is entirely on tribal land, the Pine Ridge Reservation. And I worked with a wonderful group of people. We did not all agree. There were more folks from the tribe, from the Pine Ridge in this team than there were people not from the Pine Ridge. And it took years for us to build a trusting relationship where we had rapport with each other. And it took years more to figure out how we might legally be able to disengage the National Park Service from direct land management responsibilities on tribal land, as odd as that sounds, and to really reinstate sovereignty on their own lands and still manage it as a unit of the National Park System. And we came so very close. We had, I thought, so many pieces aligned. But at the end of the day, politics matter. And there was a changeover in tribal politics, and there was going to be a changeover in the administration here. in the United States, that was going to make it a challenge. And we had to set that aside. And I was very sad because we had put so many years of work into this. And one of our last meetings was in Rapid City. We were meeting in a hotel conference room, and there were a large group of us, and a gentleman that I had argued with and grown to respect and really cared for. At some point, he started to talk and to go through, sort of a long path that we had taken. And he called me Washuka, which is white person. And, and I looked at him and was like, really, dude? We have been on this path for so long. And I get that you see me as a representative of the United States, so you're just going to call me Washuka. But excuse me, I am not Washuka. And everyone started to laugh, and he looked at me and he got really red in the face. And I said, there's a lot of press in the room right now. You could argue with me and continue to make your point. And I said, but all that's going to get carried is our argument. And I said, so let's find a way. And he was like, all right, I can do that. And afterwards, he offered me tobacco. So I thought that was great. But I wish that we had been able to pull off the Tribal National Park. So I feel like that was a leadership failure.
Well, God, I tell you what, the more I listen to you and the more I get to know you, the more impressed I am with you. You have had so many incredible experiences, and the city of Lincoln is so fortunate to have you serve in many capacities, but currently as your councilwoman, as a councilwoman. I'd really like this question, and we'll be interested to hear your comment on that. Sure. What advice would you give your younger self? Oh, what advice? I'd say don't take so long. Don't take so long. Yeah, nice. One last question for you, and then I will, I know Dean Kathy Farrell will do some closing remarks for us. One last question. You talked a little bit about the middle management position. And what advice would you have for those folks that manage employees and also manage up? Okay. Well, first, what advice do you have when we manage our employees to also manage up? Yeah. Okay, so first I'm going to ask everyone who is in a position above middle managers to close your ears, because I'm going to tell folks how to manage you. So I made it my goal. First thing is to figure out what my supervisors needed and to clear the deck very quickly with what they needed. If what they needed was assurance, or if what they needed was facts, figures, reports, or whatever, the first thing was to take their eyes off of me. And the best way to get them to take their eyes off of me was giving them what they needed as quickly as possible, and then telling them when I would come back to give them something else, because that gave me space to focus on employees. If I didn't have to focus on them, I could focus on employees. Then I turned to employees and I tried to figure out what would they need to get the job done and what was standing in their way, whether it was training, physical resources, time. My job was to make certain that they had everything they needed to be successful. I think that's really good advice, having experienced it myself. And I think that the advice you give is very, very sage advice. And it's advice that you have cultivated over your years of experience. And I'm just so proud to have you as our councilwoman. And I want to thank you so much for speaking today, Councilwoman Washington, Sandra, as I will less formally call you. Thank you. You're welcome, Wendy, and it's been my pleasure. Thank you. Well, it was extremely insightful, and I really enjoyed getting to know more about you, and I really enjoyed the advice that you've given us, and I think it can be used for everyone at all levels of management. And it's just so priceless to have a strong, intelligent woman such as yourself joining us today, but also serving the city of Lincoln. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm going to introduce now my co-host, Dean Kathy Farrell. She is the James Jr. and Susan Stewart Endowed Dean of the College of Business Administration. I always want to call it by the other name, and I'm not even going to say what that is. Dean of the College of Business Administration. Dean Farrell, I want to thank you so much for this partnership and continuing to do this with the Chamber of Commerce to bring high quality and high impact programs such as we've had today. And I want to turn it over to you for closing comments. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Wendy. And what a great presentation from Councilwoman Sandra Washington. So many great pieces of wisdom. And I just thought I would highlight a few things that resonated with me. One of the statements that Sandra made very early on was adherence to mission is essential to all organizations. In some ways, that's a very simple statement, but it's not necessarily something that's always simple to do. But I know in the 3 years that I've served as dean, one of the things that we did here in the College of Business was went through a strategic planning process where we actually rewrote our mission statement and rolled it out about 2 years ago. And ever since then, it's been an integral part of everything that we do, including our messaging. And we were very, very deliberate in the process of developing that mission statement. So I'm going to indulge myself by sharing with all of you what that mission statement is. And it's together we drive discovery, create opportunity, and empower individuals to lead the future of business. And the reality is when we say that about leading the future of business, we mean that for faculty, for staff, for students, for the community, and for the state of Nebraska. We want to empower our community to lead and to lead the future of business. So adhering to that mission statement is essential to our success, but it's essential to any organization's success. So great thought there. The other thing that Sandra said that was really powerful for me was real leaders can take place in different positions. But what I loved about that statement, Sandra, was really your visual. The visual that you gave was from the front of the room, not just from the front of the room, but from the side of the room, from the back of the room, basically that leaders are throughout your organization, not just at the top. And I think that is really what great leaders are all about, is they're able to identify where those leaders are in their organization and empower them. And the other statement that you made was that, especially as a middle manager, that you serve the people above you, but then manage those below you, which is what one of the questions was that came through the Q&A. But I thought your analogy or I should say your statement that said, clearing the deck for my employees to achieve the organizational goals. I know for me in my role, one of the biggest challenges I have is making sure that I can empower my leaders to do their job and do it well. And so I view my biggest role as exactly what you said, getting the impediments out of their way so that they can be successful. The more successful everyone else is around you, the more successful the organization is going to be as a whole. So thank you, Sandra, for making me sit back and reflect, and I'm sure making many of those in the audience sit back and reflect and think about what leadership means to them and what examples you set for all of us to think, to be more thoughtful in the way in which we approach leadership every day. So I just want to close by saying first, Wendy, as always, the College of Business is so excited to continue this longstanding partnership with the Chamber. And although it is usually in the spring in person, we are so excited that we were able to come up with a great format this year with the 3 one-hour virtual webinars. And I know how important it is to be able to pivot during a pandemic. And I know all of you have gone through these situations where we're trying to pivot. But a lot of times we come up with ideas and we execute on ideas that we find can be great alternatives to the way in which we've always done it. So thank you for all all of you for being here today. And thank you again for your thoughtful comments, Sandra. And I want to make sure I put in a plug for the next webinar, which is on Thursday, October 1st from 12 to 1 with Brandy McManus, who is one of our assistant professors in the College of Business. And she's going to talk about facts and fiction of women in negotiations. So there's still time to register, so we hope that we can see you there. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here, and thank you, Wendy and Sandra, for being here as well. So thank you.